Hello, ladies, and welcome to the talk with the whole parenting. I'm really happy that you could all join us here today for our discussion to kick off Black breastfeeding Week here in the in across internationally in diaspora. And I am happy that each of you chose to say yes to come on. We're going to be speaking about a subject that is quite personal, but a subject that is also quite important for us to discuss. And I think we're not discussing it enough in our community as Black women. So what I want for you to do right now, we have five lovely ladies with us. Oh, also, welcome to those of you who are on Facebook and joining us live on Facebook. We are very happy to have you all. So ladies, can you introduce yourself? Sorry, I should have asked you all to introduce yourself first. Can you introduce yourself? And I have Audrey first at the top. So Audrey, can you start? And then we go on to Charez and Linda and Charez and Susan. Can you start by introducing yourself? Tell us a little bit about who you are.
Okay. Hi everybody, yeah. I'm Audrey. I'm a mother of one. She's now 4-year-old. I live in the Caribbean, in the French Caribbean in Martinique, but I had my baby in New York. So I went through the whole, and actually I was pregnant. During my whole pregnancy, I was living in London. So I went through both the New York and the London healthcare system, so I could compare the two. And we are now back in the Caribbean, where I am from originally.
Thank you, Audrey. Charez?
Hi, I'm Charez. I have 2 kids. My son is 12 and my daughter, Maya, she's 5. And I am from Trinidad, but I live in New Jersey. I had both of my kids in the US. So my perspective will be from the US side, since I've never experienced pregnancy or anything like that in Trinidad.
Thank you, Charez, sorry. Not Linda. You're on mute. Come on, unmute, Linda.
Sorry. Hi. Yes.
Go ahead.
Hi everyone. I am mother of a 15-month-old boy who's keeping me extremely busy. I had my son here in Dominica. I had my son here in Dominica at the hospital, and I had my son by cesarean, and I didn't know to leave. I had to have a scheduled cesarean because of complications, but I had it months now, and it has been a really good experience being a mother. And as we go on through this session, I'll speak to you about my breastfeeding experience, the highs, the lows, the wins, the losses. So I'm looking forward to this session.
Thank you, Linda. Charez. Sorry. I must apologize because I think I'm going to do this for the rest of the session, call you one by the wrong name. So we have a Charez and we have a Charez.
Actually, that's how everybody mispronounces my name, Charez. So it's like a second name now. So my name is Charez Ferrara. I am the mother of a 14-month-old baby girl who is keeping both myself and my fiance on our toes every day. We had her in New York, and we planned on having a home birth, but I came down with preeclampsia, but I realized that she's a diamond because she was born under pressure.
Yes.
So I'm really looking forward to sharing my breastfeeding experience with everybody today.
Thank you so much. Suzanne has been traveling, so we're so happy to have Suzanne right now because I know she must be like running to the ground.
My name is Suzanne Ferrara. I'm a mother of 2. I have a 2-year-old and an 8-year-old. and I'm based in the UK, London, England specifically. So I'll be sharing my experience from that perspective.
Yes. Thank you. So, and my name is Louise, and for those of you who do not know me, I am a mom of 2 boys. I am currently a breastfeeding mom because I have a 4-month-old baby, and he went to sleep at a very strange time just a while ago. So please, if he wakes up, we may have to see a demonstration of breastfeeding because I may have to breastfeed him. Don't worry, it will be discreet. You see, you can only see from my head up. But we may have to deal with live on, breastfeeding in action. I am also the founder of The Whole Parenting, and we have this online talk show that we do, The Talk, where we speak to mothers and professionals and about all things around parenting, particularly as it relates to parenting in the Black community. And so I'm happy to have everybody on today. And we just want to go straight into our discussion, because today we want to discuss breastfeeding in the Black community by presenting anecdotal evidence from you lovely ladies. And we want to discuss the good, we want to discuss the bad, we want to discuss the ugly, and we have an hour to do all of that. We want to also do this to celebrate Black breastfeeding and bring awareness and normalize it in spaces where it is not yet normalized. And I know people say in general, let's normalize breastfeeding in the Black community. And I don't think everywhere in the Black community that breastfeeding is normalized. I think there are some communities where breastfeeding is normalized. But wherever there may be the issue where breastfeeding isn't normalized, we would like to bring that to there and to bring the celebrating of breastfeeding to those communities. And we also want to show that despite the statistics, despite the history, despite whatever we are dealing with, we still are able to breastfeed our babies. There are people who are still able to breastfeed their babies. Now, at The Whole Parenting, our biggest message is parenting through connection. You will hear me talking about this over and over again, and I hope you don't get fed up with me talking about parenting through connection, because this is where my heart is. I really strongly believe that when we parent through connection, it really deals with a myriad of problems and solves those parenting problems quite easily. So out of this, because of this, I like to, and I hold breastfeeding as one of the most important parenting activities. And it is something that is really high on my list. And I encourage the practice of breastfeeding because it is probably the easiest and most profound way to establish connection with our children. And what better way to do it than a most natural feeding practice between us and our children. Now, while I encourage breastfeeding, I am very aware that it is not always straightforward. I am very aware that the difficulties that we could face through breastfeeding, in establishing breastfeeding, can sometimes be extraordinarily difficult. And because of that, many people are unable to breastfeed despite their best intentions. And so I want to talk about that a bit more, but I also want to speak about it in particular where it relates to Black women, because Black women face a significant amount of complexities where breastfeeding is concerned. And I don't want to go too much into the history and the whys and all of that. But according to statistics, I also don't want to go into too much statistics because we don't want to lose too much time. But according to research statistics, we have a much lower breastfeeding rate than communities outside of the Black community. So like other communities, like the white community or the Asian community, or, you know, whether East Asian or South Asian. We also know that the evidence shows that Black families suffer the highest infant mortality rate in the UK, and in the US, Black babies are dying at twice the rate as white babies. So we know that there are other contributing factors to why Black babies are dying, and there's a higher infant mortality rate in Black babies than in white babies. But the research shows that breastfeeding can significantly reduce infant mortality. And so this is why it's so important. You know, we also know that breastfeeding is important for the mother herself, in terms of reducing the rates of ovarian cancer, the rates of breast cancer, reducing obesity, reducing other health issues that we have. And it's so important for us for us as mothers. But like I said, there are issues preventing Black mothers from breastfeeding, and it's what we want to get into some of this right now. Now, one of the many factors within the Black community contributing to Black women not taking up or engaging in breastfeeding is the transgenerational transmission of trauma. And I'll just mention this is just one thing, like the transgenerational transmission of trauma, of breastfeeding trauma, because our foreparents were used as wet nurses, forcefully used as wet nurses to breastfeed the slave master's children, often at the detriment of their own children. And so Black women often didn't have any agency over their bodies, and it's passed down in our biological trauma, but also in a psychological trauma, so that we tend to want to not engage with breastfeeding because it could feel as if it's something that is forced upon us and we have no agency. And this is one of the reasons why the experts say Black women tend to not want to breastfeed. Now, the first question I want to ask is, and I want to take you down memory lane a bit, and for some of you, you are still breastfeeding. Can you tell us about your breastfeeding journey, the start of your breastfeeding journey, what it was like? We know that different people have different experiences, and we just want to hear from each of you what your breastfeeding experience was like. Lindell, you had a cesarean section, so it may have influenced how the whole golden hour was for you after breastfeeding. So can we start from Suzanne, go up since we started from Malcolm. Suzanne, tell us about your breastfeeding. You have 2 girls. Tell us about your breastfeeding journey and the start of your breastfeeding journey. What was it like?
So with my first daughter, we did the whole kind of prenatal classes, on how to breastfeed. And when she was born, she latched immediately. It was lovely. We had no problems whatsoever. It was blissful actually throughout, and I breastfed for 18 months.
Yeah.
And when I had my second daughter, I expected it to be somewhat the same, but because it was my second time around, tried to engage with because it was about a 7.5 year gap between my first and second.
Yeah.
So I wanted a bit of a refresher as to kind of tips on breastfeeding that wasn't available. You know, your experience, you've done it before, so you know you should be fine, good to go. So I was a bit suspicious because I do like to read up about things, but I held to that belief. And my second one didn't latch immediately at all. And there was a total absence of support. I'm an older mum, And the absence of support, advice, guidance, I found was shocking the second time around. They really just leave you to it. So for those people who are thinking of going through that journey multiple times, just be aware, in the UK, be aware that that support service just isn't there. And because I didn't get that support, it was quite traumatic in a sense of, you know, wanting to feed your baby and having difficulties latching. And they were very keen to advise and encourage me to go on the bottle straight away. And for my own personal reasons, I didn't want to. Yeah, because I have a lot of personal reasons for the, feeling that breast is best and was best for my daughter and for me. So the thing that really made the difference was I went and saw a breastfeeding coach. I joined a breastfeeding forum online. And I think that was a thing that was really transformative for me. Suddenly hearing stories, I suddenly realized being of a certain age where extended families are rather detached, meant that I didn't really have any elders to kind of come to and provide the support in a way that maybe if I had a doula that I might well have. So once I got onto those online forums, I started to feel better. And then I went to the breastfeeding coach and a workshop, and they literally were kind of hold it. They got out the dolls, they were holding their breasts and demonstrating. And it's so amazing because there's such a sort of a slight embarrassment about women's bodies. So even people, when I was saying, how do I do it? And you're trying to handle your own body to try and get it into this child's world. You could see in the previous conversations I've had with elder sisters, them being slightly nervous about referring, grab it, move it there, kind of thing. Whereas in this workshop, they're just straight up, listen, put it in that mouth, ram it, listen, let me hold it. And as soon as I got it that first time, it was good to go. And she was underweight a little while, but I kept going to the workshops and looking into the forums, and I'm still breastfeeding her. She's nearly 2 years. I'm still breastfeeding her and kind of weaning her off. But it was an experience.
Thank you, Susan. That was quite informative, and it will answer. It will help with some of the questions that we ask later on. Actually, Charez.
Unmute.
Tell us about your breastfeeding journey, especially the initial.
So I think in hindsight, it was a beautiful challenge. We were very fortunate because we wanted a home birth, we had a doula and a midwife from, I think about when I was 4 months pregnant. So though we had to travel between the interim of being in Dominica and actually traveling to New York, our doula and our midwife kept in touch with us. She was heaven sent. I still, up to today, I say once I hear her voice, it literally calms me. If she's ranting on Facebook about breastfeeding and Black women and their rights and that sort of thing. What happened with us is that because I came down with preeclampsia, I think mentally it sort of broke me a bit because I had these really high expectations and all my affirmations would fall into place and everything was unfolding nicely. And we met the doula once we got to New York, and everything just seemed near perfect. And I think for me, finding out that I had preeclampsia, it affected me more than I expected. And once we had the baby, of course, we had that challenge of the milk not coming in, and it was difficult because being in the hospital, we had nurses that had to come in and do their routines, and it was frustrating for my fiance and myself because we knew that our daughter is hungry and we're not sure what to do next, and we still wanted to consider, trying. They kept telling us to try to breastfeed as much as we can. The more you try that and you increase that demand, the flow would come. But it didn't come immediately. I remember what happened, and I'm getting a bit personal, and I hope my fiance will forgive me for it. But I remember our doula suggested, okay, if we cannot do, if we're going to have to consider formula, let's at least try donating breast milk from one of her patients. She knows her history, she knows everything about her, she's healthy, and that sort of thing. So we considered that over formula.
Yeah.
And I remember the first time our daughter drank, that breast milk from another mother. It was like she seemed so flushed prior to that, and immediately as soon as she took in the milk, she just calmed down, and I wanted to break down and cry because I felt as a mother at that point I could not provide her the breast milk that I thought or imagined that I could.
Yeah.
Some time elapsed, and the breast milk eventually came, and I remember the day my fiance was literally pumping on my behalf. He was like, "Oh, the breast milk is here," and it was a big party, But of course, we had challenges latching. So for me, as a new mother, you read all these books and you have all these and everybody's saying be positive, it will come, and then you face with all these challenges, and then you get back and you feel like, wow, what's going on?
Yeah.
Really, what happened is that she and she's 14 months, and I say I'm weaning her off. I'm trying my best, but my fiance keeps telling me that he can see that I'm enjoying it. And I know that further into the conversation, I can talk more on the experience of, I know you said we'll talk about what it was like with the actual breastfeeding, but the journey itself, at first, it was very challenging. But once we got the hang of it, similar to what Suzanne said, it just came very naturally. Yeah. And that's when I started to feel like a woman again.
Unfortunately, I won't speak now. I'm Linda.
Let me make sure my mic is not muted. All right.
Fine.
So my breastfeeding experience was it's a challenging one. First of all, I had my son via cesarean, and I was put under. I was out of it. I didn't get to see him until like the afternoon after I had him. Like I went into surgery like after 3 in the afternoon, and so we didn't have that skin to skin. It just skin to skin bonding, and then him doing the breast crawl, they call it.
Yeah.
I think the baby crawls to the breast and latches on naturally. I didn't have that. What I remember, because I can't remember a lot from the day I had him, or even I can't remember much from the rest of that week. I had him the Wednesday, and like the rest of the week was a blur. Because I was on such heavy drugs and I was really drowsy for the rest of the day, into the Thursday, into the Friday. It was just what I remember, my first breastfeeding experience after I had child was my Auntie Evelyn. I'm not sure if she's watching now. She actually came in to with me for my son's birth. And I remember her coming to me and saying, "Linda, here's a baby, he needs to eat." And she actually took my breast out and put him on me and tried to get him to latch on. So she was initiating the breastfeeding. She was trying to help him to get latched on and put the breast in his mouth and everything, because I was still out of it during that time. He did latch on, not as effectively or appropriately enough, but he did try. And then I didn't have any milk as yet. My milk took a while to come in. Even in the hospital while we were there, he wasn't getting anything. And then the nurses had to end up giving him some formula in a little cup, because the nurses in Dominica, they don't believe in bottle feeding or formula. Once you're in the hospital or in the clinic, they don't believe that. Okay. They won't give you any formula. They ask you not to come with bottles. They ask you not to come with, but they will only give you, they will have formula for like emergency situations. For instance, in my situation, milk did not come because I had to be there 3 or 4 days because I had a cesarean. It was a natural birth. I had to stay until I could walk again, until I, did and the baby went. And so for those 4 days, I kept trying to get into latch on and trying to get into nurse so that it would bring on my milk production. And it wasn't successful at all. And the nurses had to give him some formula because when they checked his blood sugar, it was very, very low. And they said that they need to give him formula. And although I didn't want to give my baby any formula, I wanted to exclude him to only have breast milk, but I'm like, I can't let my child die. Yeah. So they gave him some, like 2 ounces, a small measuring cup. Couldn't believe in bottle feeding because of all the nipple confusion and all that. They don't want you to feed the baby with a bottle. They believe strictly breast milk, okay. Only breastfeeding. But for situations like mine, they will allow formula, but not in a bottle. So they gave him some and then immediately calmed down. So at that point, I realized that he was really hungry, and it really made me feel bad. I felt like crying because I'm his mother, and I kind of him, and he was hungry, and I couldn't help. And after that, when we went home, we were discharged. And when I did the first visit was like 2 days after I went home. We had to go back to the hospital to see the nurse. And when she weighed him, she said that he was just on the threshold of being admitted to NICU, to the nursery. His weight was too low. He was born small. He was born like 5 pounds, and then his weight was too low. So she wanted, at that visit, she wanted to admit him. And I'm like, he only lost the weight because he not getting breast milk and my milk hasn't come in yet. And she told me, okay, usually it's natural for them to lose a bit of weight. Their birth weight once they've been born and have a few days has elapsed. It's usual that they'll lose some weight. Yeah. So she asked me to try and keep putting him on the breast and get latch on properly and get him into nurse so that it will stimulate the milk production. And she told me I could feed him formula for like once a day, like 2 ounces once a day, just to get his weight up. Because she said, if you want him to be admitted to the NICU, I have to get his weight up. Yeah. I had to do that. I had to just feed him 2 ounces once a day, and then his weight came. He increased. He gained some weight, and thankfully I did not have to be admitted. He didn't have to be admitted to the NICU. But yes, even after that, I was still adamant about not continuing with the formula. So that was for like the first month I had to do that until my breast milk started coming. So then I decided I needed to do some research. I had to consulted my sisters, Louisa, and I had to call her like all the time. I was calling her and telling her the challenges I was experiencing, and she was really encouraging. She kept telling me, "You can do it. Just keep at it. Keep putting him on, and keep nursing him. Then the milk will come." And she encouraged me to add stuff to my diet like oatmeal and drink a lot of water, and I did that as well as doing some research. Finding out that if I really want my breast milk to come and if I want to exclusively feed my baby breast milk, I had to get on a rigorous plan and just stick to it. I had to discipline myself and pump like 3 to 4 times a day, always drink water, have my oatmeal, fennel tea. It was like a boot camp I had myself in, just so that my milk production could increase and I could get my son to just for 6 months to feed him exclusively breast milk alone. And then I was successful. It happened. He grew on breast milk alone after I did that plan, and it worked. I think the support and the encouragement from my sister and other people who I spoke to, and then doing my own research and being determined to breastfeed my son, exclusively, this really helped in keeping me focused and helping me to become disciplined in order to get my breast milk to come, so that I could, feed my son. I could stick to my plan, because that was always my plan, to only give him breast milk. I did not want to formula feed. So that was basically my experience with breast.
Thank you, Lindell. Charez?
So for my son, I keep saying that I was a young mother. I wasn't like very young, but I was like around 21. So I was pretty young when I had him. And I had zero experience with babies. Like, I never held a baby until I held my son. I never changed a diaper until that night he was born in the hospital. So everything was brand new for me. Initially, when he was born, I did the skin-to-skin bonding and everything in the hospital, and all of that was based off of my reading and my research. I should say I had a lot of time on my hands while I was pregnant. I was just sitting there, so I read a lot of different things. My mother was in Trinidad all throughout my pregnancy, so yes, we would communicate on the phone and stuff like that, but it wasn't really the same of having her like there with me to like share her experiences and everything. So I was kind of like on my own throughout my pregnancy. So I knew I wanted to breastfeed, and it was more of a reason behind it is that I know that my mom breastfed me, and I also knew that formula was expensive. And then I was like a little crazy in my mind, because I was reading all of the like different things that they say was in the formulas, like aluminum and metal and all sorts of crazy ingredients that I was like, I don't know if I want, that going into my baby. So I was determined to breastfeed, but I know like going to the doctors and stuff, they were giving me formula even before I had my baby. So before I had my son, I had like about 6 months worth of formula I was just getting from all my appointments. They would just give me formula, different types of formula, just pushing it on me. And they never like talked about breastfeeding. I was never like given any support groups or any type of like literature or anything on breastfeeding. Like, that was just all on my own research. So initially when I had him in the hospital, like that first night, the what is it called, colostrum started coming in, and he was latching on. He was a pretty big baby. He was 8 pounds and 6 ounces or something like that. And the nurse was like, well, you're gonna have to give him a bottle, because he's gonna be hungry. I'm like, well, they said this is what's supposed to come out at first. Like, I'm not supposed to have a lot of milk just like gushing out initially, so I'm gonna stick with it. So that's what I kept saying, like, no, I'm gonna try it. And they're like, well, he's losing weight. But I'm like, well, I read that babies lose their weight anyway, he's not crying, he's not screaming, he's on me. I would just keep switching him from breast to breast, like, just trying to like stimulate my my flow. And it was slow at first, but I feel like about, I guess it took a week or so for the milk to come in, but I was never like gushing out a lot of milk initially. It took a while for it to come out. And then I was also small chested, so I was an A cup before I had my son. So I never had any boobs to speak of, right? So that was another thing, like the nurses were telling me that there's nothing there, like you don't have any milk, like there's nothing there. I was like, well, it's gonna come, I was like, if he's crying and if he's hungry, I may consider giving him a bottle. And there were times in between that he got formula like in between like that those first days or the first couple weeks. But honestly, when he got it, he would spit it up. He would spit it right back up on me. So I kind of just stuck with my breast. And for my daughter, it was easier. As soon as she was born, I just put her on my breast, and she just started just right away. You know, I didn't have any issues with her. My main issue with her was getting her off of me, and hence the reason that we did it for 2.5 years. I breastfed my daughter, even when she was on solids and she was running around. That we still did it. And I think that a lot of people probably judge like, why is she still on there? Like, you know, people say as soon as they can ask for it or reach and take it out themselves, they're too old. But I just felt that when she was really ready to stop, that she would stop, even though there were times that I was just like, please just leave me alone. I don't want it. But I just continued, you know, my body was making it, you know, and that's how she went to sleep in like 3 minutes. So I always just kept with it until she was over it.
Yeah. Thank you, Charez. Audrey.
Yeah, so I think with hindsight, I'll say that I was lucky enough to go through my pregnancy in London. So I had access to a lot of knowledge. There was the baby show and lots of conferences and all that. And I like numbers and stats and all that. So I read all those numbers about Black women, about the impact of breastfeeding on the baby's brain development, about all that. And when I got to the US, I was again very fortunate because I gave birth at Bellevue Hospital in New York City. And there was none of that forcing you to give the bottle. There was no agenda. And it was more about breast is actually best. So I had an emergency C-section because my baby I was 40 weeks plus 2 days when I went back to the hospital. No contractions, nothing. I thought I was fine. Turned out, you know, she wasn't so fine. And I had my birth plan and I was ready to give birth naturally. No medication, nothing, and nothing went according to plan. So I thought, you know, the last thing that I can hold on to is actually being able to breastfeed. And again, I was very fortunate because they did it the right way. They waited till the last minute for the emergency C-section. I didn't go through the whole anesthetic. So it was like from the waist down. So I lived the whole experience. And as soon as I was stitched up, I was back in my room and I had my baby with me. So I didn't have the lapse of not even 2 hours. I think it was less than an hour that she was in the room with her dad. And then right after that, I went back in the room and the nurse put her on my chest and she latched on very, very naturally and easily. I was fortunate enough to have a lot of guidance from the medical team, and everything went smooth sailing from then. I was very adamant that breast is best, and that it was also from a psychological perspective very important for me because it's like this inexplicable bond that you can build with your child. And I saw that in her, the fact that, you know, this was a very comforting experience for her. It's like you're communicating with your baby without actually saying anything, but you're forcing this idea, I'm here for you and you can hold on to mommy and everything will be okay. And that's why it was very much of a team effort because I breastfed her until she was 3 years and 4 months. So literally after the first day of school, I said, right, you're a big girl now. Girls don't do that. There is now you cannot have the breast anymore. You're a big girl, you go to school, you got your friends. I want to tell your friends that you still want milk at night, you know, and that you're gonna look like a baby. And she was like, okay, mommy. And that was the last day. So that was my journey. And yes, you know, at the beginning you're tired, and I was also the mommies who does it on demand. I didn't even try the whole schedule thing because I was like, how natural is that? Like, is it me not getting it? And my whole thing throughout my pregnancy and throughout the motherhood in general is be kind with yourself and listen to your body and listen to your baby. And I thought, you know what, great if it works for moms. I'm not gonna go there. This is not for me. I'm just gonna do it on demand. So that means very hectic sleeping schedules. But it's all worth it in the end. So yeah.
Thank you, ladies. There seems to be a theme with most of you moms of it, your breastfeeding journey not starting off in a prescriptive way, like how you really wanted it to start off. And I want to move on to the next question on the back of that. So there is, it is believed that the numbers, so for instance, the CDC data on breastfeeding in the US says that about 75% of white mothers breastfeed, they will take up breastfeeding, as opposed to 58 point something percent of Black mothers who will take up breastfeeding. But what it also says is that the retention rate is quite low. So Black mothers will start breastfeeding, and not only Black mothers, white mothers will start doing this, but Black mothers particularly start breastfeeding, and then within a short space of time, they will stop breastfeeding. So the breastfeeding retention rate is quite low. And that goes down, that dips to a very low percentage. So by the time a baby is 3 months old, very often the Black mothers would have stopped breastfeeding, so for whatever reason. Or they would have introduced solids, they would have introduced water, they would have introduced some type of substitute to breast. What I want to ask you, ladies, is, and I mean, the research says a lot of things, and sometimes you need anecdotal evidence, you need to understand it from the ground, what is causing this. What do you think, in your experience as mothers, and in your experience as sisters, and in your experience as living in the Black, having lived in the Black community, what do you think could be causing this lack of retention, the retention rate to be dropping, or the retention rate to be so low? What do you think could cause a mother to stop?
Well, I would say here in the US, it's just a way of life, especially for the Black community. So as far as I know, in the UK or even Canada, you guys get like a year or more after you have your child, you get to stay at home with your child, and the government gives you money, right? So no, that's not the case over here. You're lucky if you have 6 weeks. I say lucky if you have 6 weeks after you give birth, then you have to go back to work. So if you want to stay out with your child longer than 6 weeks, because 6 weeks is the legal limit, and it depends on the type of job that you have. So it's a lot of Black mothers, statistically, and it's sad to say, a lot of people are single mothers. Some people are working minimum wage jobs, like real jobs. They're not in corporate fully. So these jobs only have to give you 6 weeks or sometimes 4 weeks, and they don't pay you the full rate that of your pay. And oftentimes you're forced to go back to work because you have to provide for the child, right? So a lot of these mothers are going back to work that soon, and they have to put the baby in daycare or leave the baby with a family member or whomever, so they can't, breastfeed. And it was just like recently, I learned, like after having my second child, that with insurance, and that's not something that is what's the word, like government sponsored here. You have to have medical insurance is through your employer. So there are a lot of people that are uninsured as well. And through insurance, they pay for you to have a breast pump. So a breast pump over here is expensive, like a good one, right? So a lot of people don't have the resources as well to have a breast pump and stuff like that.
Yeah.
And and people that are lower income, they have like food stamps or a government assisted food from and that's where they give them formula. They get formula for free, basically. So they're pushing formula on them that way because they get it for free. They have to go back to work, you know. So I think that's a very big reason that a lot of Black moms or lower income moms or people that are forced to go back to work, it depends on where you work as well. It's not really set up for breastfeeding. It's not really advocated for breastfeeding. So I was fortunate, like I had to go back to work after my second child, but I was out for 6 weeks. But when I went back to work, legally, I guess in corporate America, there is a room. It's supposed to be dedicated. Each place has to have room for mothers to pump. Yeah. They have to have a separate refrigerator. And I can get up 25 times a day and go pump. You can't tell me anything if I want, you know, but I was fortunate enough to have that. A lot of people don't have that.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah.
I think it's very important, like you mentioned, that the socioeconomic factor is the biggest one. I've seen it in the US. It's very, very clear that there is an issue with the pharma industry, the way they're pushing formulas to the doctor office and the way the doctor office is incentivized to push the formula down the Black community in general, because I do believe that there is a systematic targeting of the Black community because this is a captive audience, right? And with the system of food stamp and EBT, this is another way to literally lock them down the route of formula. On top of that, I think there is a notion of reimagining motherhood in the Black community, which needs to happen. You mentioned the trauma from slavery, but I did, like in my case, I was very stubborn and I see pregnancy and motherhood as a very personal thing. So you can't really tell me what to do. I've researched it and I've made my mind, and that's that. And for me, breastfeeding was important. And I read the research about the impact on the child development and how long you had to do it, et cetera, et cetera. But my mom breastfed and my grandma did and all that, but not for as long as I did. And when I went back home, people were like shocked. Like literally some of them, I do suspect that some of them thought I had some psychological issues and it was more for me than for the kid and things like that. But there's notion of a mother being willing to build up the child self-esteem, the child notion of courage, notion of comfort, all these which are necessarily associated with Blackness in general, because we're usually perceived as the strong ones. I think there is this work of reimagining motherhood and what we want to give our children and what we have the right to give our children still needs to happen within the community, so that the mothers decide to breastfeed for as long as they want, really. Don't get the looks or don't get the questions or don't get, hold on, she's talking. I mean, she's talking, she shouldn't be on your breast. She's fully mobile, and I had a big baby. My child was, she's big, she's tall. So obviously, like when she was 15 months, you would think that she was probably 2.5. I would get even more questions because of that. And my answer was, well, you know, she's big and she's all that she is because I'm breastfeeding her, you know, and not despite the fact that I'm breastfeeding her, because the rhetoric can be so that it turns into something negative. And I'm thinking, wow, we're really missing the point here, because you're not seeing all the benefits that this has for her, for her psyche, for her psychological buildup, for her body in general. You're seeing what society tells you a Black mother should look like. And also I had to go through the fact that I had my child for what I consider being late in life. And I was very, very sure that I wasn't going to go back and be an investment banker 12 hours a day while I had her. So for me, in my head, I knew that it would be like at least 1 to 2 years of work.
Yeah.
And I wanted to be completely dedicated to her and all that. And people would be like, but hold on, what are you doing? Like, this is stopping
Have
you
you
to
lost your mind? You're leaving investment banking.
like literally this breastfeeding thing is stopping you to go back to work.
Yeah.
And now I'm back at work and it's fine.
Yeah. I really agree with you on that. We need to change the narrative on what motherhood, Black motherhood is. I really agree with you. And that could take up a whole other talk, but we can discuss that another time. Yeah. Anybody else wants to?
Yeah, I think another factor that contributes to that is lack of support from community in terms of church, when you go to church or when you go out to socialize, or what if you're a child or even home. Sometimes they make remarks like, isn't it? It's time for you to stop, your big boy, or it's time for you to stop, your big girl, or you're not giving him milk. Why don't you buy some formula for him? Why don't you buy some this? Why don't you give him a bottle? And it's constant, and it's like you have to battle to defend your stance on breastfeeding and why you want to breastfeed your child. And PAHO recommends you breastfeed up to 3 or 4 years.
Yeah, up to 2.
It's not practical for everyone, but if a mother chooses to do that, I think it's unfair for people to constantly be telling her or making remarks to the baby themselves. You too big, it's time for you to stop. Or you walking, time for you to stop on stuff like that. And it makes it. I have had people say those things to me, and it makes me uncomfortable. But I'm saying I'm so adamant about breastfeeding. I'm still breastfeeding him at 15 months. I'm so adamant about it. And because of the struggle that I had initially with my breast milk coming in, and I am really determined to just breastfeed. But what about other mothers who are not as strong as I am and who get this encouragement or these constant negative remarks and these constant negative reinforcement? What about maybe if the child hears and the child can pick up on that kind of negative energy and they just decide that they don't want to breastfeed anymore? So I think one of the reasons that Black mothers in our community does not continue the breastfeeding is because of the external constant negative talk or negative criticism or negative comments about your choice to breastfeed past 6 months. I figure as soon as they feel the child can talk or the child can laugh, you're supposed to stop or you're supposed to just push. I'm not sure if it makes people uncomfortable when you breastfeed or what it is, but I have had comments like that said to me, and I know how it makes me feel.
I think it goes back to a little bit of what Audrey was saying about the reimagining of what the redefining of what motherhood is. And I feel sometimes it could come across as if you think breastfeeding is something that you have to do to just keep the child alive, you know, and all the other benefits of breastfeeding, they are the reasons why we breastfeed. It doesn't seem to be important enough, you know, for connection, for comfort. If your child wants to breastfeed, and people could easily criticize you for breastfeeding on demand, because it's about the child, and people don't realize the importance and how beneficial that is to the child as well. So yeah, so I agree with you, Linda, there. Yeah, it's quite important that we start thinking differently.
Yeah, it's funny because we go back again to this notion of dehumanization of Black people that you will find in very, very different dimensions of society. But if we were a bit more focused on building up our kids mentally, psychologically, if we were willing to invest on that front, which is very, very rarely talked about, then we would focus more on breastfeeding. Because we would create space for it. And also we would stop with this ignorant rhetoric, because at the end of the day, motherhood is not a community project. So you don't need to chime in every 5 minutes with, your prohibition, your disapproval of someone breastfeeding a kid, because at the end of the day, it's actually someone doing something very, very good for the kid. And we as a community need to take a good look at ourselves and need to start reading a little bit more and decide, what do we want for us and what do we want the next generation to look like, and are we going to invest in the next generation for that to happen? So it really is about dreaming the next generation and the build up of the next generation.
And it's about us. That's our generation of parents. We raising babies, we have children, we every one of us, I think, here have a child who's under 5 at least. It's about us changing that in our own little corners, you know. And when people say stuff to our children like, "You're walking already, leave mommy alone," like, I don't need you to advocate for me against my child, you know. I don't need you to tell my child to leave me alone and don't ask me for breast milk because they're walking. I'm doing this because this is my role. You know, we have to change that, and we have to speak to our children. We have to stop people, normalize stopping people from saying stuff like that to us and our children in the nicest way possible, in the kindness, because in everything you're doing it in kindness, but in the kindness and sternest way possible. You know, you say that to people, to get them to realize that we need to change this. We need to rethink parenting in the Black community, and this harshness and this parenting and the acts that we do just only out of necessity, what we think is necessity, it needs to go beyond that, because what we think is necessity is it's a much larger, you know, gap. There's much more that makes that up. Does anybody else want to? Susan, you look like you're gearing up.
Yeah, I wanted to chime in because I felt that it went on, you know, reimagining motherhood, but people's perception of womanhood and bodies. So there is a thing, particularly amongst Black women, in the fetishization of Black women's bodies.
Sexualization,
sexualization, etc. Now, what I was very surprised with was that a lot of the time as a new mum, I would have conversations with other women where they would refer, oh, you know, actually I wanted to get my own body back, and, you know, and all this kind of things about actually feeling that breastfeeding was in some way giving away power to this baby.
Yes.
And seeing the bottle as a way of saying, you know what, they get their food there, and you know, I'm still sexy, I'm some other, I'm sexual or whatever, and that can be something distinct from my body and my motherhood. You know, some really quite strange views. And similarly, as when I'm breastfeeding, the kind of reactions of discomfort from other women to
that
say
surprises me, you know, that really surprises me. Yeah.
Discomfort from other women around seeing a breast and, you know, seeing it at breastfeeding, feeling that there's something a bit strange there. And it plays out in what Audrey says about, especially as they get older, they think that there was some sort of Freudian issue going on there, we continue it. But just even from a young age, with Layla, I noticed people's reaction to say, "Oh, why would you want to do that?" And even they sell all these covers, the breastfeeding covers. Because I'm like, I'm a radical breastfeeder. I'm getting those mammary glands out anyway, and
so why do you even have to define yourself as radical? It's just a natural thing. Like, why do you want to stifle your child under a cover?
Yeah, it's like
you're the whole thing out.
Yeah, all these kind of within kind of breastfeeding rooms, whatever, all this accoutrement that women go through to hide the fact that they're breastfeeding. I just think is done to, because of this connotations with something sexual, or you know, it's really, I find it quite unnerving to see other women talking and viewing other people in that way, it's not a good thing. So there is something about within the kind of prenatal stages, when people are going with counselors or talking with friends, preparing women for that element in terms of the knowledge of themselves, the change that they might go through psychologically, even as they see their body doing things in the way that they do, recovering from, Linda, you talked about C-section. I'm not sure whether you had kind of conversations and support in terms of the recovery process for your bodies, and then how that interacted with the breastfeeding process. And there's all this well-being support and general understanding of womanhood that I don't think is really addressed in terms of the care that I've experienced in the UK. And I think it's a real gap. Turning the body into a political debate. Whereas those people who are pro-breastfeeding or pro-bottle can start at it. I mean, really tearing down and judging other people for their choices. I just saw these forums and I found it quite amusing, because while I am very pro-breastfeeding, I'm also conscious that there are a number of women, for a number of reasons, cannot breastfeed. And that's, to me, that's okay.
Absolutely. And I think so many women have tried. So many women have tried and have not been able to, for a plethora of reasons. There are several reasons that you can pick out one as to why they have not been able to do it. There are some women who choose not to do it for sensible reasons as well, good enough reasons, and you have to respect that. What I fail to respect is people who criticize women who do, and who try to make their breastfeeding experience a negative one. And Jennifer Grayson wrote this book called Unlatched, and she in the book, one of her statements is that since the rise of artificial formula, we have turned a biological process into a never-ending controversy. And I don't understand how such a natural process, a natural act, can be turned into something political and can be turned into such a controversy. Actually, I do understand why, because like Audrey was saying, there is an agenda. It's since the rise of formula. Without formula, we wouldn't have this political conversation, this political issue, to be honest, outside of the issues that Black women have. Outside of what we face as Black women, we still are dealing with these political issues around formula feeding and the pushing of it, and some medical personnel are so quick to push formula feeding onto you. And I do understand, even in my case, I mean, I'm a second-time mom, and just recently my son's weight dipped after he was born. He was born heavy. It's almost 9 pounds, right? So he was born heavy and his weight dipped because my milk took a few days to come in. Everybody doesn't have a straightforward, the milk doesn't just come. And we need to, this is another thing as well, I think we need to talk about. We need to talk to mothers about the fact that the milk doesn't just come straight out. It might take some time, because the anxiety that builds up within you from your milk not coming just causes your milk not to come anymore.
Yeah,
you understand. But even for me, when my son's weight went a bit lower, which everybody knows that the baby's weight goes lower, they were ready to ask me to feed him formula without telling me of anything else that I could do to help my milk to come. And I understand you can encourage a mother to give their baby formula in the interim, but at the same time, you need to be telling her what to do to help her milk to come. If this is what she wants to do, if breastfeeding is what she wants to do, then encourage her to do that, other than just pushing formula. Charez, I don't know if you wanted to say something about the question that we've kind of gone over.
I think everybody's feedback was really awesome. Actually, I definitely agree that part of the reason why you may find so many Black women, breastfeeding for such little time or choosing not to breastfeed at all, if I should even say choose,
Yeah.
I believe it's because of a lack of support.
Mm.
I was fortunate because our midwife, she really knows how to represent Black women. She really stands by Black women, and she stands by her patients. Even before we had the baby, she spoke with my fiance and myself about the tough questions. How comfortable will we be? What what will we do if we're in the supermarket and our daughter suddenly has to feed? Will we run to the vehicle or will we breastfeed her right there and then? How will I feel breastfeeding her around, my uncles or my father, people that probably wouldn't be privy to seeing any type of cleavage? And it really prepared us for it prepared us mentally, and it really helped us to sort of gain some perspective on what breastfeeding really means to us. And even with my fiance, the good thing about him is that during while we were at the hospital, when I was too exhausted to deal with the nurses, I remember there was this time that he basically scolded one of the nurses and told her to get out of the room because she came into the room and she was saying, she needs to wake up the baby, and because she has to check her vitals, and it was about 4 o'clock in the morning and she had just fell asleep. And I think if I did not have that continuous support, in
Yeah.
addition to other little things, I would have probably started her on formula sooner, even if that was never my intentions. So
Yeah.
I think Audrey was the one who mentioned, I can't remember who, but somebody mentioned, single Black women have it more difficult because they don't have that support system.
Yeah.
And sometimes, although Cherie said she had her child young, she knew what she wanted and she stuck to it. Sometimes as a patient, you expect that the doctors and the nurses know better anyway. So you tend to sort of lean into what they say without really tapping into your intuition and deciding to say, hey, this is me and my child, and I will stay connected. So I think a lot of it has to do with support. And of course, like Cherise had mentioned, in the US, for example, and even in Dominica, there's this pressure to get back to work. You
Yeah.
know, we have about 12 weeks maternity leave, and sometimes, most times, it begins while we're still pregnant. There's pressure to get back to work, and you're wondering, well, we have to do something because I cannot breastfeed the baby, and I probably cannot pump enough to keep the baby fed. So it's so many different reasons why Black women specifically are more likely to fall into the category of not breastfeeding for as long as they probably would like. And as you mentioned earlier, Louisanne, it's a whole other kind of wounds that we can open in this conversation surrounding Black women and the support they get generally.
Yeah.
But that's just my 2 cents for now.
Yeah. Thank you, ladies. I mean, that was really good comments you made, and stuff that we could talk about for a long time, to be honest. Now, some of the conversations coming out from women breastfeeding and the experiences that they've had is that, like, some women say that healthcare professionals are quick to tell them that they're not producing enough milk, for instance, and that they need to get onto formula instead, because Charisse, you said something similar, like, they will even tell you stuff like you have nothing in there because you have small breasts. Another issue in Black breastfeeding is that some women will have issues. We all know, like, there's pain that comes with breastfeeding sometimes. It shouldn't always be. And there's stuff that you can do to stop that pain, and get over it. But sometimes, two things: Black women are not always listened to when we speak about pain. We are seen as iron women, that we should be able to take more pain. And that's a whole other conversation we don't want to go into right now. But also, healthcare professionals seem to not always recognize the signs when something is going on. So, for instance, something like mastitis, you can't be looking for red nipples or redness in the breast because we have brown skin. And it's very unlikely that you will see much redness or a pink nipple when you have brown nipples. You understand? So it's a lot of issues with breastfeeding is misdiagnosed in Black women. And then instead of getting support to help you to solve that problem, which could easily be solved, you end up being left with all that pain. And women seem to just leave breastfeeding alone, because if the doctor is saying that nothing is wrong with me and I'm having so much pain, there's nobody to help me. So what am I going to do? I just can't continue breastfeeding. So these are some of the other issues that have come up. And when we couple that with the transgenerational transmission of trauma and the narrative, conscious narrative and unconscious narrative in the Black community about breastfeeding, because of the transgenerational transmission of trauma and our unconscious feelings about it, you wonder, well, sorry, I want to ask, I don't want to say, do you think there is room? So I think Breastfeeding Week is in its 7th year or something like that. I may be wrong, but it hasn't been going on for that long. And I think there was resistance to Black Breastfeeding Week happening when it started from the Black community, because some people don't think it's important enough, but also from outside, because people feel that having something called Black Breastfeeding Week is racist and prejudice. Clearly not understanding what we are faced with as Black women, and the need for some amount of equality, equal opportunity where breastfeeding is concerned. But there was some resistance to Black Breastfeeding Week, is my understanding. But so we have this now, and I think a lot more Black people are talking. We have the Black bloggers and, talking about breastfeeding. But I don't know that in communities you have enough support around maternal health and Black breastfeeding, because we face things that are different to the general community, the general population. Do you think there is any value in having something that is for us? So a circle, a tribe that you have around to support you, because not everybody has that kind of support. Black professionals that are for Black women, who will be able to understand what I'm saying, who will themselves be able to understand what mastitis on a Black woman looks like, things like, is there any value in that? Or have you had the experience of having a circle or a tribe around you, or Black professionals who have helped you? And do you think that would have helped you? I mean, Charez, you speak a lot about your midwife and your doula, who were Black women and who seem to have that, they were fighting for Black women, and you were very fortunate, privileged in that sense. Do you think that if it was the other way around, that you just had anybody else other than a Black professional, who was fighting for that, do you think your experience would have been different if it's somebody who didn't understand?
Yeah, I do actually. So we actually found our midwife online. So I saw what she looked like. And I remember once we got to New York, we had to start looking for a doula, and she had suggested some names. And I remember telling her that I would prefer a doula that looks like me.
Mm-hmm.
I didn't want to say something that seemed racial, so I just said, does she look like us? And she said, of course, and interestingly, there was a class that my fiance and I had to attend right before birth. It was with another midwife, and she had suggested a midwife because they sort of worked together.
Yeah.
And some of the topics that came up and how we would move forward, we spoke to our midwife about it. Her class was really good, but she was Asian. And she told us about a few things. And when we discussed it with our midwife, and I said, I enjoyed most of the class, but there were a few things that stood out for me, and I'm not sure how we should approach it.
Mm-hmm.
And she sort of broke it down and said, I think it has more to do with her culture and her experience as an Asian woman to sort of guide us in that way. And she wouldn't suggest we take that approach. So even there and then, I realized that it was so necessary to, as a Black woman, to be surrounded by other Black women. One, because they understand and they've already experienced what we go through. And two, just history has shown us that Black women always have a different type of experience or challenges ahead. Yeah. So for me, even we always wanted someone that looked like us.
Yeah.
And especially being away from home, I think they sort of reminded me of an aunt that I didn't have there at the time, or another female family member that I did not have there at the time. Yeah. And just recently I saw her on Instagram ranting. She said it was a rant, but she's always fighting for Black women and their rights, and especially in New York, they spoke about a recent death with a Black woman. And she said sometimes Black women are neglected, and she's seen it so much. So that's why she makes the extra effort to advocate for Black women, especially. So for me, I just needed someone that looked like me.
It's good to have had that have you as an example of how that goes. And I just want to reiterate again, because I know this could come off as if we're being prejudiced. This is not in any way being prejudiced. This is about wanting someone who looks like you and understand and understand your experience so that they could serve you better. That's the reason for this question. Honestly, it's not about thinking that a Black woman is superior to another woman, a Black professional is superior, or that I want to be I'm encouraging us to be insular or anything like that. It's purely because I think a person who understands your story and your journey can serve you in a way that somebody who doesn't understand will serve you.
I think it's sad.
I'm gonna say something else because I think it's important. I appreciate you trying not to be prejudiced, but the facts are the facts. And the NHS has published a survey, so we know that in the curriculum, there is actually a dehumanization of women, and that's why doctors in the UK tend not to recognize that we've passed the humanly acceptable threshold of pain, because we're perceived as people who are naturally strong. The survey is there. CNN published last week on Twitter, I think, they put out a tweet saying that Black babies in the US are 3 more times likely to die when they're cared for by white doctors than when they care for by Black doctors. So I'm not going to try to be radical, but the facts are the facts. And I think we should not spend time apologizing. We should spend time saying these are the facts and what are the solutions that we're bringing to the table, because there is in no way, shape or form the need to apologize for what we're saying, because the truth is Black women are dying and Black children are dying. So this is our job to take our lives and take our power back and bring on the solutions.
And it is a life and death situation. Yes.
It is.
Yeah.
I fully agree with like everything that Audrey is saying, because like in my experience, I had a Black doctor and a woman doctor for my second child. And it was amazing. Not that anything was lacking from my first doctor, because he was an Asian man and he was very nice. He understood that that my body would be different to his Asian patients. And he even said it. He said, that's Maya. He said that he said that in terms of like when I was giving birth, that he was not going to cut me, or like he would let my body do what it does naturally, because my body makeup, my hips are wider than his Asian patients that have, like, it's harder for them, for the baby to pass through them, and he's not gonna like rush me for a cesarean, C-section, you know. So it really helps when the doctor understands like your physical makeup and stuff like that. Now, a bad experience with Maya that I had was that when I went into labor with her, because again of insurance, I couldn't go to the hospital that my actual doctor was assigned to. So I had to go to another hospital. So my physical Black lady doctor did not deliver Maya. So I got to the hospital and my water broke, and I'm telling them like, this is my second child. There is like, I don't know, muscle memory. I don't know. She's probably gonna come faster than my first child. And I'm telling them that, hey, I feel like I need to start pushing. Like I had her completely natural with like no medicine, and that was my choice. But looking back now, I guess it was a good thing. And now that I'm, I guess, older, I wish I had a doula, and I wish I did a home birth. I probably could have at this point, because I had her completely natural. And I was telling them that she's coming. I feel the need to push, and they weren't listening to me. And they're like, no, you're not ready yet. And then I'm like, well, okay, well, give me that epidural. And they go there and they're like, oh my God, the baby's here. It's too late for an epidural. I'm like, this is what I was telling you. I'm telling you that I'm in pain. I'm telling you she's coming. You're not listening to me. And that's the problem with doctors. They don't listen to us. They don't listen to the Black fathers. They don't listen. They dismiss us, and I feel like that's why we have to stop being unapologetic about it, and like really be more outspoken, and want Black doctors, and want people that are going to advocate and have our best interests. So I am highly a supporter of that. And even like now that as I've gotten older and I'm seeking like doctors and stuff from myself and my children, and it's not about being racist, but I actively seek doctors that look like me, or I actively seek Latino doctors, like, you know, brown or Black, or, you know, doctors that understand my culture, understand my body better, you know, because a Spanish doctor would understand me, I feel, better than someone that's Caucasian or something. And it's not about being racist. It's just about preference, and everyone has their preference. So I don't think we need to apologize for that at all.
I guess it's more than preference. It's just about, you know, thinking you will understand this better, and you know this journey, and you see it in a different way. So I want somebody who can speak my language and who will understand what I'm saying in a more appropriate way. Ladies, the time is going quickly, and I have one more question. The time has gone, actually. So what I want to ask you to close off is, what are some things that made your breastfeeding journey easier? Like, and this is for any breastfeeding mother, or a mother, a woman who may breastfeed in the future, because this will be on an evergreen type of panel discussion that will stay online. So in years to come, people might still watch it, hopefully. What are some things that made your breastfeeding journey easier? We're talking products, we're talking thought patterns, we're talking support, available resources. Tell us some of the things that made your breastfeeding, as quickly as possible, because we have one more question after that. What made your breastfeeding journey and your breastfeeding experience easier for you?
I would say don't stick to like a schedule. Just do what your baby is in charge, your body is in charge. I never knew about like what is it? I just did it on demand. I didn't know there was like a a term for it, but whenever she cried, whenever she reached for it, whenever she wanted, wherever we were, I just gave it to her. And for as long as she wanted, for as short as she wanted, like I never tried to put it in a box, like where, oh, it's for 2 hours or every 2 hours, or it's just on demand. And that made it completely like easier for me. Like, don't try to put it in a box or stick to a schedule.
Mm-hmm. Thank you. Anyone else?
I think I'll say, like everything really, motherhood and pregnancy and the baby, always be kind with yourself and accept that Mother Nature will do her job. And just, you know, just go with the flow. I did just like Charez, and I did the on-demand thing, and accept that this is a blessing, and just be kind with yourself. We can be kind with your baby, and this is a great opportunity to actually reconnect with your inner self and your intuition, and develop your baby intuition as well. So just go with the flow.
So my experience was a bit easier with the support that I had from like my sisters, my mom, my friends like Charez, and where they would encourage me to just stick to it. And one of my sister told me, don't feed on a schedule, just feed on demand. And that made it so much easier for me. Aside from the initial challenge I had, when my breast milk came in, they told me just feed on demand, just feed him whenever he cries, whenever he needs it, just give it to him. And I think that the support, that's what helped to make it easier for me, because without that support, maybe I would have given up, or a little, I would have given up, I think, because of the C-section and all the pain and everything I was going through, in addition to not being able to feed my child. Without the support of my sisters and my mom, I would not have been able to continue.
Thank you. Anyone else? Some things that made your breastfeeding journey easier. Go ahead, Susan.
Yeah, I've got 3 things. The first thing is be informed. So do the research in terms of understanding what's in your breast milk, as opposed to what's in the formula. So you are really making an informed decision about when you're going, if you're deciding to bottle feed, it's an informed decision that you're making. And I'm not too sure that people often realize the amount of medicine, you know, liquid nutrition, all the elements of health that are caught up in breast milk. So that's the first thing. The second thing would be online forums were fantastic for me. I found actually being able to tap into those forums on Facebook and other places where they share tips of some of these forums are really quite, I wouldn't say militant, but they're very, very definite about ensuring that they understand who actually has the knowledge and experience and who's just talking opinion. And I loved that. It was very much informed, an informed discussion. And then the third, so that was really useful, and especially if you're at home, it served a multitude of services for me, not only in terms of breastfeeding, but just feeling a sense of connection with community. And then the final thing is to look after yourself, because when you are feeding on demand and also just adjusting to motherhood, it can be so difficult to learn to eat right, learn to kind of give your space to just look after yourself generally. And actually, for the purposes of the baby and keeping that milk flowing, you need to do that. You need to look after yourself generally. So I think those 3 elements were really essential for me. And if I could do it all again, if I had that in my toolbox first or second time around, things would have been very different. But that's what I pass on.
Thank you so much. Anyone else? Charez? Any?
When I said earlier I wanted someone who looks like me, I realized too that even in choosing a a doctor. I specifically wanted a woman, because I believe in women, and I know that they're not. I think male doctors can practice based on what they've learned, but to have a female doctor, especially a mother, she can really, advise and take care of you from experience. And I think that brings a level of delicacy in her practice that I appreciated. So one of the things that made my breastfeeding journey easy for me was having the right medical professionals at my side, having a doula and a midwife. Whether or not anybody will decide to have their baby at a hospital or at their home, if they're in a country where that service is available, I would highly suggest it to any woman.
Yeah.
Another thing that made it easy for me was my fiance. He's extremely supportive, very understanding, especially when it comes to women. He has 3 sisters, and I think that allows him to always be sensitive to the journey that women have to go through in life. And I think it's important to just be true to yourself and realize that there's a connection between yourself and your baby that has to be kept. And if you are in a position where you are able to hold it outside of your job or your socioeconomic background or anything like that, I think it's important to be true to self as a woman and a mother. And as long as you continue to listen to yourself and you're confident in the connection that you and your baby have, I think it will help toward having a more easy breastfeeding journey.
Thank you. Thank you so much, ladies. And to close it off, I mean, I will give my 2 cents. I think it's important to surround yourself with the right type of people. I think it's important to seek out actively and be intentional about seeking out the right type of people to surround yourself with. I think sometimes people who love you and want the best for you don't necessarily understand everything, and they will give you advice based on their own opinions and their own biases and their own complexes, and that doesn't mean that the advice that they're giving you is right. I think it's important, like Susan says, to educate yourself, make sure you know, and I think Audrey said it earlier, that she's stubborn, but I think it's an informed stubbornness that you need to have. If you are just stubborn based on my feelings, it doesn't help. If you are stubborn based on something because you're informed, you've read, you've listened to the right type of people, and you know this to be true, then you can stand your ground and be stubborn on that because you have educated yourself. And you have so many resources out there right now. But also you need to listen to yourself, be kind to yourself, as many of you already said. But I really want to stress that we surround ourselves with the right people. Find a tribe, and that may not be your best friend. It may be that you have to go outside of your best friend circle because your best friend doesn't have the same ideals where your parenting is concerned and what you want to do. But find a tribe who will support your breastfeeding journey, who will support your gentle parenting, who will support your need for your desire to parent from connection, a place of connection with your child. And I think that is so important, and I cannot stress that enough. Finding the right tribe and educating yourself on yourself. Ladies, thank you so much for coming. We've run out of time and so quickly, and you all have little ones, and I know you have to run off now. So thank you so much. I really appreciate you spending the time with us right now and helping us and educating us based on your own experiences. Thank you for everyone who's joined us on Facebook Live, and I hope that you join us soon again when we have another one of our panel discussions or when we have another one of our Talk Time Tuesdays. Thank you for joining, and thank you for everything, and see you soon.